You've heard it before. You're too much, you're too intense, you're too emotional, you're too complicated. And maybe they didn't actually say it directly. Maybe it was maybe it was in the way that they pulled away when you got too passionate or too vulnerable or too real. And and over time you learned to shrink and you learned to stay in the shallows. You learned to be smaller, quieter, more manageable. You, in essence, became an expert at hiding the parts of yourself that felt like they were too much. And here's what no one maybe got to telling you, that you're not too much. You've simply not been fully seen. See, there's a lie of being too much. Being told that you're too much is not a reflection of you. It's actually a reflection of them. It's a reflection of their inability to hold what you carry. It's their discomfort with the depth and their fear of the intensity. But it's not your truth. It's their limits. But when you hear it enough times, it sinks in. And it becomes the lens through which you view yourself, and it becomes the standard that you try to meet, a standard that demands less and less of you until there's almost nothing left. And you might call it maturity, you might call it self-control, you call it being easy to be around, for example, right? But really, it's just erasing yourself. It's hiding. But what happens when you shrink, though? You see, when you believe that you're too much, it's then that you start to think, I should shrink. You laugh a little less, you love a little less fiercely, you dream less boldly, and you start shaving the pieces of yourself just to fit into spaces that were never really designed for your wholeness. And so you start managing yourself, and you start editing your feelings and your opinions and your dreams, trying to find this version of you that will finally feel palatable or acceptable to others. But acceptance at the cost of authenticity is more of a hollow victory. It may buy you approval, but it'll never gain you connection, because no one can love the version of you that you've edited beyond recognition. See, they can only love the real you, the you that you're hiding. There's this one individual I knew once. I'm going to call him Caleb. Caleb was the life of the party. He was charismatic. He was passionate. He was unapologetically himself. But you see, every time that he let his guard down, every time he actually shared a piece of his real heart, someone would pull away. You're too sensitive, or you're too serious, or can't you just relax? So Caleb learned to hide, to keep it light, to keep it easy, to keep it safe. And for a while, it seemed to work. People liked him. He was fun. He was agreeable. But he was also alone, because no one really knew him. And deep down, he feared that if they did know him, they would leave. But there's a cost for hiding, isn't there? See, when you shrink yourself to be acceptable, you don't just connect less, you lose that connection with others. You lose the connection also with yourself. And you forget what it feels like to be fully alive. You forget what it feels like to speak without having to rehearse, to love without guarding, or to even exist without any apology. You become this spectator in your own life, watching yourself playing this role and just hoping that it'll be enough. But it never is it? Because no amount of acceptance or a version of you that isn't real can satisfy the hunger to truly be known. See, you don't want to be tolerated. You want to be loved. You want to be seen. You want to be held. You want to be known deeply. And that can only happen when you stop shrinking, when you stop hiding, when you start showing up as the full, untamed, unedited version of you. So here's why you're not too much. You're not too much. You're just not meant for small spaces. You're not too intense. You're deeply alive. You're not too emotional. You're profoundly human. And you're not complicated. You're just beautifully layered, let's say, right? The people who told you otherwise were operating from their own limitations. They weren't ready to hold someone like you, someone who refuses to fit inside their neatly designed boxes, someone who brings depth in a world that craves surface level connection. And that's not your fault. That's not your flaw. And that's not your burden to carry. It's simply the reality that not everyone has the capacity to meet you where you are. But the right ones, they won't ask you to be less. They'll see your muchness and they'll stay. Let me tell you about this other guy that I'm gonna call this in Jordan. Jordan was vibrant and passionate, unapologetic, big in their presence and emotions. But years of being told that she was too loud, too much, too intense, made her cautious, and she learned to dim her light, to temper her excitement, to edit her dreams. And for a while it seemed to work. People stuck around longer, friendships felt less volatile. But Jordan felt dead on the inside though, until one day she was exhausted by her own self-erasing. She decided, I've had enough. So she showed up messy and she spoke her mind. She loved fiercely. She cried openly. She laughed loudly. And to her surprise, some people stayed. These were real people who didn't flinch at her full expression of her fullness. Jordan realized that she had never been too much. She'd only simply been surrounded by people who'd never seen her fully, because she had never allowed herself to be seen. And once she did that, so many things changed in her experience. But there is a possibility to experience freedom from fear. See, hiding is a fear response. Shrinking is a fear response. Silencing yourself, a fear response. Fear whispers, if they see all of you, they're gonna leave. Or it'll say, if you take up too much space, they're gonna reject you. Or it says, if you show them who you really are, that's gonna cost you everything. But freedom from fear doesn't mean that those whispers vanish. It means that you stop listening to them or giving them so much credibility. Freedom says, I would rather be too much for the wrong people than not enough for myself. Or I would rather be fully seen and risk rejection than settle for half-truths. Freedom is showing up whole. Freedom is taking up space. Freedom is refusing to apologize for the fullness of who you are. And it's true. Some people will leave, but others, and these are the right ones, they're gonna stay. And they'll love you, not in spite of your muchness, but because of your muchness. See, the bright people, they're not gonna ask you to shrink. The people who are meant to be around you in your space won't be intimidated by your depth. They won't ask you to dim your light or to make them more comfortable. They won't flinch at your passion or recoil at your emotion. They'll instead breathe. They'll breathe deeper in your presence, and they'll let you in when you get real. They'll celebrate spaces that you've been told to hide. Because the right people, the ones who are capable of real connection, these aren't threatened by your wholeness at all. They're actually drawn to it. And they're tired of small talk. They're tired of surface level lives. They're tired of half-truths and performance, just like you. They're looking for someone who isn't afraid to take up space, someone who isn't afraid to be real. And when they find you, they'll recognize you. Not because you're small, at least small enough to fit in their world, but because you're actually big enough to remind them of their own untapped fullness. Let me tell you this other remembrance of this individual. This guy, I once knew, let me call him Daniel. Daniel had spent years trying to be agreeable, predictable, palatable, and he thought it would take him, he thought it would make him easier to love. And all that made him was, it made him more invisible. And one day, tired of feeling unseen in his own life, Daniel made a quiet decision. He said, no more shrinking, no more apologizing for his muchness, no more pretending that his emotions were inconvenient. And so he started speaking up and sharing his real opinions, allowing himself to be seen and to be seen in his feeling zone. And while some relationships did fall away, others grew deeper, more real, more alive. Daniel didn't lose love by being himself. He lost performance. He lost the pretense. He lost loneliness. And what he gained, though, it was worth every risk that he had taken. Because when he stopped hiding, he found the connection that he had been striving for all along. You see, my listener, you were made for more. You weren't made to be small. You weren't made to be manageable. You weren't made to fit neatly in someone else's comfort zone. You were made to experience and to be whole, to take up space with your voice, with your heart, with your dreams, with your fears, with your messy, beautiful human muchness and drama. You were made to be seen fully and loved, not despite your bigness, but because of it. And you spent enough time shrinking, enough time apologizing, enough time hiding. But it's time for you to come home to yourself, to stop measuring your worth by how easy you are to handle, to stop judging your value by how comfortable you make other people feel. Because let me remind you, you are not too much. You are exactly the right amount for the life that you were born to live. So my invitation in this episode is stop shrinking. You've spent enough of your life trying to be acceptable. You've spent enough time trying to be easy or trying to be less. You've starved the parts of yourself that in the process of trying to feed other people's comfort. But here's the truth I want you to be challenged by. The life that you're craving, the love that you're craving, the connection that you desire, it doesn't live in the small spaces that you've been hiding in. It lives actually in the places that you've been told are too much. It lives in the unedited, the unfiltered, the unapologetic fullness of who you are. So you don't need to shrink to be loved. And you don't need to hide to be accepted. You don't need to perform to be seen. You need to show up whole. You need to stand in your muchness without apology, without shame, without fear, because the ones who are meant for you, the ones who are capable of the real connection with you, they will never ask you to be less. They will see you, they will recognize you, they will know you, they will choose you, and they'll choose all of you. See, freedom from fear starts in this moment when you're considering this challenge. Freedom from fear is not about never feeling afraid anymore. It's about refusing to let the fear dictate your worth. It's about standing tall in the face of rejection and saying, I refuse to shrink. I refuse to make myself small into spaces that are too small for my soul. It's about trusting that your fullness is not a flaw. It's your invitation to the kind of life and the love that doesn't just tolerate you, but actually celebrates you. And it's about choosing day after day to show up real, even when it's risky. even when it feels safer or easier to hide. This, this isn't something that happens all at once, though. It's a practice, and it's slow, it's steady, but it's like a rebellion against fear, and it starts now. So it's your turn. You think you're too much, perhaps, but you've never actually been seen fully. And the world needs your fullness far more than you realize. So I want to hear from you, my dear listener. Have you ever felt like you had to shrink to be loved? Have you ever caught yourself hiding the parts of you that feel like they're too much? And what would it look like to stop that? To drop your story that you've been subscribing to that keeps you small. Drop your experience in the comments, not just for me, but for everyone else who's reading and who's been told in a world of silence that's who they have to be someone who's loved. Because your courage to show up as you are, messy, real, unapologetic, it might be the very permission that someone else has been waiting for to in essence do the same for themselves. And I'll read those anecdotes, I'll read those stories, and I'll respond in time. But I appreciate you considering. Thank you for listening through with me. You got this.